would say the other benefit of it is typically with a pre-exhaust exercise, I wouldn't ever necessarily go to absolute exhaustion on that first exercise. I would use that first exercise almost as an exciter for that muscle group, so it's primed and ready for the secondary exercise. So if you have a muscle group that doesn't necessarily fire particularly well within a compound movement, you can use an isolation exercise prior to going into your compound movement, activate that muscle group, make it easier for your body to stimulate a contraction in that muscle group. So when you then go into your primary exercise, your big compound lift, you can properly fire that muscle group as well. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Performance Proposition. I'm Zab.
I'm Matt.
That's the intro.
That is the intro. We need to get a better intro.
Yeah. I feel like we're used to introducing other people now, so it's
yeah. Although I do actually wonder, because I never listen back to the episodes.
Yeah, I mean that's the best way to live
when they get edited and put up. So I have no idea whether or not this bit ever makes it in.
It does occasionally.
It does occasionally.
Yeah.
Only occasionally, though.
Only occasionally. It depends on how much I get embarrassed by it.
Fair. Or how much extra shit we talk.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's a lot.
That right there means I can tick the explicit content box.
Oh, dear. Right. Today we are going to talk about supersets.
We are.
But what are supersets?
Before we do that.
Oh, sorry.
Before we do that. So you know how we use Google Drive a lot?
Yes.
I can see you looking for the punchline already. It's hilarious. I'm just going to drag this right.
Oh, God, please don't. I'll cut it right down.
No, we use Google Drive a lot.
Yep.
You know, say we were to have Bugs Bunny on the podcast.
Yep.
He doesn't use Google Drive at all. He only takes a WhatsApp doc.
I mean, the fact that you spent 10 minutes over there while the cameras were rolling, finding that joke again.
It made me chuckle.
I'm glad you didn't extend it, because that would have really. I mean, I'm already upset, but that would have really upset me. Right, we are going to talk about supersets rather than that joke. So supersets are a combination of movements. So you would basically stack two exercises back to back before resting.
Yeah. And just for clarity, superset, two exercises, not more.
I would say you could have multiple, like anything that contains multiple exercises back to back is a superset. So that could go up to trisets, could go up to giant sets, but realistically, it has to be a minimum of two exercises. Yeah. So in a standard scenario, you would do it's one exercise, rest, same exercise, rest for however many sets. In a superset variation, you would do two or more exercises back to back, then rest, and then repeat.
So one might say it's the salsa of gym exercise combinations. Because did you know that salsa is not actually a dance style?
Okay.
It's a combination of lots of different dance styles, like rumba and bachata. And
the fact you know more about my heritage is bad for me. It's bad for me. So that's what supersets are. Mm-hmm. There are a multitude of different types. Mm-hmm. You have agonist. So two exercises basically targeting the same muscle group, and you can do them either as a pre-exhaust, where you do a isolation exercise followed by a compound movement. So you do calf raises prior to doing squats.
Yeah.
Or leg extensions prior to doing squats is potentially a more relevant one. Or you could do it post-exhaust. So do your compound exercise and then really target a specific muscle group with an isolation exercise afterwards. So just basically the reverse of that. You would do bench press into pec flies as an option.
Yeah.
The alternative is you do agonist-antagonist. So you work two opposing muscle groups. So you would do a chest exercise followed by a back exercise. Or you could do it so you do upper-lower. So you're doing a leg exercise followed by a shoulder exercise and go back and forth between those two.
So one is designed to utilize the fatigue to either pre or post exhaust, and one is designed to kind of minimize the fatigue of doing 2 exercises back to back, right? So that's kind of the main differential between the two, is like we're either creating fatigue to utilize that to create greater fatigue, or we're minimizing the fatigue in a certain area by doing another exercise that doesn't fatigue that area.
Yeah. So downsides of supersetting, because we regularly see people saying that supersetting isn't necessarily that great, is that because there's fatigue, it's going to lead to you getting less out of each exercise. So if you do a chest press followed by a pec fly, chances are your pec fly is going to be like performed at a lower intensity or a lower amount of volume than you would have done it if you were fresh. Which leads to less total mechanical tension in each set, so less of a muscle growth stimulus in each set. Similarly, even if you do if you do use a situation where you go agonist antagonist, if there's enough fatigue in your system from doing a chest exercise, it's still going to leave you feeling a little bit depleted going into your back exercise. So the chances are you'll lose
because even
a couple of reps here or there.
Even agonist antagonist, your antagonist is usually your primary stabilizer for your agonist, right? A lot of the time.
Also just energy system wise, right? If you're in a position where you're being told to go max out for 1 minute and then you're going to rest, and then all of a sudden you're stacking 2 1-minute sets back to back, the intensity is going to have to drop because the fact your cardiovascular system, your energy systems aren't going to be able to cope with that level of work. So there's just that slight drop off there. So that's the downside. But the potential upside is that in spite of the fact you're reducing the amount of stimulus per set, you're able to consolidate more sets into less time. So it becomes more time efficient. And with time efficiency, although each set is going to have less of a stimulative effect, I managed to say it. I think I managed to say it. I'll listen back later. Because you're doing more sets, the total stimulus could be the same or even higher in a shorter period of time, right?
So it has a similar effect to what we talked about the other week in terms of reducing rest periods, where by getting more work done in the session, you can over time reap the benefits of, being able to do a higher density of work per hour of your session. I say per hour because some people are mad and like to train for 2, 3, 4 hours a day. So, if they're doing supersets, imagine the work they're getting in.
But it's that whole thing of if you have the time to train for 2, 3 hours a day, you probably don't need to worry that much about strategies that are going to improve time efficiency.
Unless you want to get to 50 sets per muscle group per day.
If you do three hours worth of work, that's 180 minutes. That's 50 sets over 180 minutes, which is still like 3 minutes a set, which is probably all right.
Fair.
But, it's a
per muscle
over.
group per day.
Per muscle group per day. Yeah, in that scenario, then you have to be mental and do lots and lots of supersets. But
I reckon.
Regardless, basically, the primary benefit of it is if you're the sort of person who, like most of us, is relatively busy. The idea of training for more than an hour is nuts, and there is only so much work you can do in an hour. So if there is anything that you can do to allow yourself to get more work into that hour-long workout, 40-minute long workout, whatever amount of time you have within your day, within your week, there's going to be benefit to that.
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but usually if I'm training someone, the maximum I can squeeze into a session is 5 exercises if they're single. Because you've got setup time, close down time, whatever. And if you've got a PT doing that for you, it's even faster. But if you're doing it on your own, it takes even more time. But if I'm doing supersets, I can probably get about 4 supersets in, which is 8 exercises, which is almost double the maximum amount that I can usually fit in doing single exercises. So that just gives you like an indication, because most people are like, oh, but it's all the same work, so it doesn't take, it can't be. If you're doing, 3 sets of that and that together, why does that need to take more time or less time even than doing 3 sets of both of them? Individually.
Once you account for rest, if you say that you're going to rest for 2 minutes per set, if you're doing somewhere in that kind of region of 8 to 12 reps, 6 to 12 reps, probably need to have about 2 minutes rest between sets in order to maximize the amount of volume you can get on each set. So the set's probably taking somewhere between 40 seconds and a minute. Your rest's taking 2 minutes, so that's 3 minutes per set. So 9 minutes for 3 sets versus 12 minutes for 3 sets of 2 exercises.
Yeah.
Which is, over the course of an hour, that adds up. That extra...
A lot.
Yeah. That extra 6 minutes that you're getting back, repeated 3 times, is a good chunk of time. That's a good 20 minutes to chuck in your core and your cool down work if you actually want to do the accessories.
Well, that's the crazy thing, right? Is like how much like small bits of time that you save across a workout can snowball into like a huge saving, like in total. Like you know when people like, it's why I always say to people, you got to time your rest, right?
Yeah.
You got to make sure you're strict timing rest, because the second you're there, like, oh, I'm just gonna feel it, I'm gonna go, and you like maybe you rest for an extra minute per set, and you're doing 5 sets. That's 5 minutes gone.
Yeah.
And so, like you say, any time we can claw back in that and get more work done, we get better results, we get better stimulative effect across the session.
Oh, well said, well done.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the things, not to plug personal training, but to kind of plug personal training. Like you said before, there's the kind of setup time, close down time for each exercise. Like the amount of time you get back by having a personal trainer do that for you. Like all of a sudden, each time you're setting up a new exercise, your personal trainer can be setting up that next exercise while you're finishing off your final set.
Yeah.
While you're then starting your first set of that new exercise, your personal trainer's getting rid of all the weights that you'd be using on your previous exercise. All of a sudden, that saved you 5 minutes in each transition.
Yeah.
So if you're doing 3 different complexes in a session, that's 15 minutes of time bought back just by doing that.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's a really important thing for a lot of people. There are some people that like time does not matter. Yeah. But the vast majority of people that really want to train and actually struggle to train, the main limiting factor for them is the time in their day. Like I was talking to Dean Geeta's client today about the fact that's one of the big issues that he faces and always faced while working. It's like, how do I get a decent session in when I've only realistically got 30 minutes to an hour each day to try and squeeze a session in? And it's like, well, things like supersets are going to be really beneficial for that. So the main benefit is obviously the time saved and the fact that as a result, you might be able to get a really decent amount of stimulus into a really short space of time. Let's talk about why you might use each particular variation. So if we start off with pre-exhaust.
So pre-exhaust, you're basically just using an exercise to tire out a muscle group to enable you to take it closer to failure in usually a slightly bigger compound exercise. So like you said, your example of leg extensions into squats, pre-fatigue in the quads, because the quads are, depending on the type of squat, primary mover, one of the primary movers at least in the squat. So you pre-fatigue them, and then you're doing your squats, you get much, much closer to failure in a shorter amount of time.
See, like I would say the other benefit of it is typically with a pre-exhaust exercise, I wouldn't ever necessarily go to absolute exhaustion on that first exercise. I would use that first exercise almost as an exciter for that muscle group, so it's primed and ready for the secondary exercise. So if you have a muscle group that doesn't necessarily fire particularly well within a compound movement, you can use an isolation exercise prior to going into your compound movement, activate that muscle group, make it easier for your body to stimulate a contraction in that muscle group. So when you then go into your primary exercise, your big compound lift, you can properly fire that muscle group as well.
Is that necessarily a pre-exhaust though, or would that fall more into that category, like you said, of like contrast training, or not necessarily contrast training, but complementary
I think the whole thing around, so it probably does fit more into that category, but I think if you were going to really look at trying to fatigue a muscle group maximally though, like you'd probably be better off doing your compound movement first, so going down that post-exhaust route, which is what seems to come up in most studies anyway. If you're going to take a muscle to failure, you're better off going compound movement first, then isolating that muscle group, because that's going to lead to
because that compound movement, you need to move more weight, you need to be fresher, you need to have more focus and attention. Whereas if your quads are fucking burning and on fire and you're about to get under a bar to do a squat, you're like,
yeah. It's like if your quads are depleted when you're going into your squats, you're not going to be able to push anywhere near close to maximum on that squat. Whereas you can still push yourself pretty close to failure. Well, you'll be able to push yourself to absolute failure on a leg extension following a set of squats.
Yeah. If you've just done a nice set of squats and you're like, cool, I'm fired up, that was probably very close to my maximum. And then you sit on the leg extension, like you say, all you got to do is hold on to those bars as hard as you can and keep trying to push until you can't push anymore. Because if you fail a leg extension, you're not getting squashed.
Yeah. Less likely to die on a leg extension than on a back squat.
Exactly. I mean, it sort of leads as well into like another interesting point I find about a lot of like the reasons that people will say to use supersets. We sort of touched on it briefly in terms of talking about building muscle and the stimulus. Is like a lot of it comes from bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes from very much that very laser focused perspective that we said a lot of the fitness industry has, which is how can I best maximize muscle growth?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the pinch of salt you have to take as well with supersets and a lot of these strategies is like a lot of the well-touted ones like the pre-exhaust, post-exhaust, agonist, antagonist is all about how can I apply maximal stimulus to a muscle to generate a maximum amount of growth.
Yeah. And
it's you forget sometimes, or people forget sometimes, that there are other things you can do with it, such as French contrast training, like the mobility stuff. So like fresh contrast training.
We can call it fresh.
Fresh contrast training. French contrast training is essentially you do a heavy compound movement, something big, something strong, to engage as much muscle mass as possible. So when I was at Scotland Sevens, we used to do a really interesting one, which was heavy back squats. For doubles, into a 10-meter timing gate sprint. So you're increasing that neural stimulus to those muscles that you're about to sprint with. So your quads are fired up, they've just moved, double your body weight, let's say. And then you're like, cool, now produce that quickly with all this stuff. But the more classic one you might use is, again, squats and jumps. Or like a deadlift and a broad jump. Or something like that, like just something to get anything.
Any big heavy compound lift, followed by anything that is slightly more speed or power oriented. Basically, is what we're looking for. And do we want to go into why that kind of makes sense and why that works and how you might want to implement it, or are we kind of like just gonna leave that there for today?
Let's leave that there for today because I feel like there's more that we can talk about, and there's it's like almost like an adjacent topic.
Let's talk about what you were saying before then. So we kind of see like complementary training strategies like that. We always kind of hear about post-activation potentiation or French contrast training or whatever we want to call it. But we don't necessarily hear about what you were saying before in terms of combining mobility exercises or activation exercises with big heavy compound lifts to make sure you get the most out of the compound lift.
So it was something that I used to do a lot when I was coaching small group stuff because we just talked about how time pressured PT sessions are. There's so much more time pressure on a small group session because you're essentially trying to get 6 people with 6 bars and 6 weights and people who want to talk and do things through a session in an hour. And if they don't get through their full session in an hour, they don't feel like they've done enough. So it's kind of my way of going, look, we'll do a quick warm up and then we'll do this compound movement. And while you're doing this compound movement, we'll work on a mobility exercise that is going to improve your position, form, whatever bit of it would be. So like an example would be, I might do a bench press and a sort of, I can never remember what they're called, but a sort of
Cuban lift type.
Cuban press with a band.
Okay,
like a banded Cuban press or something like that, where they're bench pressing and they're really getting their shoulder nice and active and they're keeping their back nice and engaged so that they're actually open and they're using their chest. And it's like, cool, now we're getting more from that compound because we're engaging these little muscles around it, and we're putting ourselves in these lovely positions. And as we go through the sets, we're finding that we can get better range, better control, and overall better stimulus out of the movement.
Fair. So the other side of the other one that we didn't discuss or haven't spoken about yet was the antagonist agonist or agonist antagonist supersetting, and how or why that's a useful strategy. So obviously with agonist antagonist, you're not taking a muscle further towards failure, which is like the standard, the main principle behind agonist supersets. So anything where you're doing post exhaust work where you're just trying to take a muscle that otherwise wouldn't have been stimulated enough to greater levels of fatigue to create a bigger response from your body. With the agonist antagonist supersets, you're working on opposing muscle groups, which means that you're actually going to get less stimulation from the subsequent exercise within each set. So if I do a bench press and bent over row complex, chances are my bent over row is going to suffer a little bit compared to my bench press. But I'm still able to get a hell of a lot more work done in a lot less time. I don't need to rest for as long between sets, because in the scenario where we do a post exhaust, you're still having to have that complete rest period because of the fact you've taken your muscle so close to failure. If you don't rest for long enough, you won't be able to perform another set anywhere near close to the level that you want to. In an agonist antagonist superset, while you're working one muscle, you're resting the other. So all of a sudden you can kind of take that work time for the subsequent exercise out of your total rest time. So if you're working for 40 seconds and you would have wanted to rest for 2 minutes, all of a sudden you only have to rest for a minute and a half between sets. So you're getting a bit more of a benefit. You're getting a bit more.
So it becomes even more time efficient.
Becomes a lot more time efficient.
The interesting point to talk about here, and we talked about it briefly before the podcast started, is the best. Well, first question. Multiple levels to this.
Okay.
Do you find that it's easier to do antagonist-agonist supersets with upper body than it is with lower body? Because I always find that there's a much more defined, this is working, when you come to upper body. So like you said, bench press, bent over row, there's very much a front and back.
Whereas deadlift, squats, not so much. I mean, you can do it. So I used to do it with kind of an RDL or hinge variation and a squat variation. Or it's easy enough to do if you're looking at machine isolation exercises. So if you do leg extensions, leg curls. So typically, I do like an agonist-antagonist split. If I was doing, say, a heavy compound lift, and I'd just do that as my strength work at the start of the session, but I just wanted to get some extra accessories in. I could combine those two accessory movements and get quite a time-efficient accessory section in.
That's what I was going to say, is like the only time I ever really do antagonist lower body ones is like squats and RDLs is a good one. But even then you're still really working your back hard because you're having to stabilize the bar and you're having to hold on to it. But like you say, you take it to isolation stuff, you go leg extension, leg curl. It's fine.
I mean, the alternative, if you don't really want to work your back too hard, is you do lunges, because you're dropping the weight down slightly.
Delicious.
You put in less pressure on your core in that secondary exercise. So you could do your RDLs, go into your lunges, come back, do your RDLs, and just suffer endlessly as much as you enjoy to, because you are a sadist. If you've ever seen Matt in the gym, Matt is always having a good time doing things that for anybody else would be a shit time.
Well, Aaron said to me the other day, he's like, "You're able to talk. Why are you not training again? Don't you hate yourself today?" And I was like, "That's a good point. I'll do my set now."
Aaron would mock that, because like Aaron is an Olympic lifter. Well, his strength work revolves around taking 4 minutes recovery, watching videos back of himself, telling himself how much he hates himself in the video, asking someone else how much they hate him, then getting on and doing another set, and then maybe one set in 10 over the course of his hour and a half long session he's happy with. And then he'll still post the bloopers.
And he calls it, if he's happy, he calls it jazzy. Look how jazzy this was. I'm like, you enjoyed that one, did you? Wow. You enjoyed that.
I've never heard him say that, so I've never seen him happy.
Oh, you've never seen him happy? Yeah. He posted a set of 6 power snatches the other day and like tagged me in it and was like CrossFit. And I sent him a message. I was like, "Oh yeah, CrossFit with like a minute in between each rep. I don't think it counts."
It would be a losing attempt at CrossFit.
Yeah, when you have to speed up like the period between reps. It's no longer straight reps.
No, I also definitely not call it CrossFit.
That is a weightlifter like set of 6. That is not a set of 6.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So back to the agonist antagonist supersets. So typically you'd use it with like an upper body day, and it just means that you can get a hell of a lot more volume done.
Yeah.
One thing we should also probably talk about a little bit is training splits and when certain strategies are more applicable, or even goals and when certain strategies are more applicable, right?
Yep.
So if your goal is hypertrophy, and you are doing a standard like bro split. Yeah,
I love it.
I love getting to say that. And you're doing, say, a leg session, then a push session, then a pull session, then another leg session, then a shoulder and an arm session, or what have you. And you're splitting your work up over that many days in a week. Then on your upper body days, you're probably going to want to use some form of pre-exhaust or post-exhaust superset over doing a push-pull superset, because that doesn't really make sense within that structure. Maybe that arm and shoulder day, you could have it so that it's a push-pull session, and you can get a little bit of extra volume in that way, but you're probably better off just sticking with pre and post-exhaust. When you have less training days in your week, so you're only training, say, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, you might want to go leg day, push-pull day, leg day, push-pull day. Yeah. And in that scenario, then we start thinking about bringing in agonist, antagonist. Maybe your leg day becomes a leg and shoulder day, and you have a chest and back day, and you can again do agonist, antagonist.
You can pull them together, and like you can even go, you could even like go a step further and have like 5 training days a week, have full body uppers, full body uppers, full body, and go post exhaust on your uppers days. And have it as a push day and a pull day. And then on your full body days, you can do your upper body work, agonist, antagonist, and lower body stuff.
That sounds like a freaking brutal week. When's my upper body getting to rest? Just weekends. Yeah. Team no days off.
Yeah, but the thing is, you could say like your upper body days, they're your like upper body compounds. So like if I was ever going to split a week like that, I would go full body and I'd do like, a dumbbell bench press and a dumbbell bent over row. Along with my heavy lower body compounds. So I save that neural stimulus. So it's kind of like hypertrophy day then for the upper body. And then on the next day, it's like heavy bench press with some post exhaust.
Wait, so you've got your full body day, then your upper body day is a kind of accessory focused or hypertrophy focused
like
day.
one upper body compound. So like a bench press, for example. And then post exhaust or pre exhaust for your accessories, just basically rinsing your anterior chain. And then on Wednesday you might then do some more lower body compounds and some like light push pull uppers, whatever you didn't work on that day. And then on the Thursday you might do chin ups as your main compound. And then post exhaust for pull. Do you know what I mean?
I feel like we need to almost write that out and present it as a slide over the top of it, because that's a complicated one.
Yeah. And the only other thing that we haven't talked about is what we did. So it was the second part to my antagonist-agonist question, is the use of upper body, lower body supersets. And what do you call it? Peripheral blood shunting?
Yeah. An old school name. This is the thing with like fitness, and it's every single system seems to get renamed by someone and repackaged by someone to then resell it for more and more money. But originally when I came into the industry like 20 years ago, people used to do upper body, lower body supersets and call it peripheral blood shunting. Now I don't even know what it's referred to as. But basically the idea is that you do an upper body exercise followed by a lower body exercise or vice versa. And as a result of the fact you're using opposing extremities of the body, blood has to be redirected from one part of the body to another part of the body. So the way that as we exercise, our vascular system works is that it dilates the areas that we need to send blood to and constricts the areas we don't need to send blood to. The more you're having to redirect blood flow to provide energy,
the harder your cardiovascular
system, the more
efficient
your body becomes in redirecting blood flow, so the better the cardiovascular benefits. So to start with, you'll probably feel faint as hell, awful, weak. Everything will go to pop. But then as you start to improve your cardiovascular system, as you start to improve cardiovascular responsiveness, you're going to see a massive improvement in capacity to perform work and capacity to direct blood flow from one part of the body to another.
Yeah. But an interesting caveat to that, just for people listening, is that a lot of the time to generate that level of blood shunting, you often have to be doing like, you know, a 10 RM deadlift followed by a 10 RM overhead press or something. You know, like you have to be like working really, really hard. Like if you're just doing, say, a set of 5 squats and then
it depends on the regularity with which you're, like if you're not resting very long.
Yeah,
like,
if you're not resting very long.
At the end of the day, if you're doing 5 reps and then resting for less than a minute and then going for 5 reps with the opposing muscle group, like you're still having to direct blood flow.
Yeah.
In order, like all mechanical work requires the production and release of energy. So the more intense that mechanical work, the more energy is required, the more energy is demanded. So the more blood flow is going to be demanded to either deliver oxygen for the exercise or deliver oxygen to clear any kind of waste products within that area. So yeah, I know what you mean though. It's that whole thing of like it's about the amount of total load that you're exposing yourself to. If you're not really exposing yourself to that much load, it probably isn't going to matter. If you're resting for 2 minutes between exercises, it probably doesn't matter that you're superset. But if you're
even 30 seconds, you know, 30 seconds can make all the difference. sometimes. Interestingly, one superset that I've found a lot of value from recently with clients is like a squat or a trap bar deadlift or something like that into push press.
Yeah.
Which I find is like it's almost like sort of half and half contrast training and peripheral blood shunting, if that makes sense, because you're priming the legs,
you're priming
the core to then be more efficient in transferring energy into that bar, but then you're also getting that stimulus through the upper body and having to, you know, shunt blood and work, and that bit gets tired. And so it's just a really interesting little. It just came to my mind, and I thought I'd say it because it's just an example of all of these things aren't necessarily hard and fast. And like you say, everything's been done to this point. So I'm not going to try and call it like a fucking new type of training.
Faulkner contrast training.
Faulkner contrast training. I like that.
I mean, yeah, of course you would. Because every single personal trainer has an ego problem.
Or call it Faulkner performance training.
Yeah, nice. I see it. It's even better. Yeah. For those of you that don't understand that, it's because Matt is Faulkner Performance. Check him out on Instagram because it is a heroic Instagram channel. Cool. Okay, so we've spoken about detriments, we've spoken about benefits, we've spoken about how and why we'd apply them. Have anything you want to say in summary, or you kind of feel like we've covered most of it?
I feel like we've covered most of it. I think the primary benefit for most people is time saving. Yeah. So like, if you're thinking about doing supersets and you're like, which superset shall I do? Which strategy shall I use? For most people, like just put exercises that make sense together to save yourself some time and get them in a workout. And then once you're getting everything you want to get done, then start thinking, am I going to go pre-post exhaust? Am I going to go antagonist agonist? Can I set it up in a different way? But for the majority of people, the main benefit is time.
It goes back to, if we look at the podcast that we did with Sam, where he was talking about how he designs his training week, and it's like, right, I just start with a massive blank canvas and I just note down all the exercises that I'm going to do over the course of the week, all the things that I need to try and stimulate, what degree I need to stimulate them to.
Yeah.
And then try and find ways to do that over the course of a week in a way that just looks and feels right and is the most time efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
So the one thing I might say we should bring in, or not even necessarily bring in, but like maybe kind of link to in another week, is the whole idea around, so you can superset exercises, but you can almost do the same with sessions. So it's not that you're doing 2 sessions back to back on the same day, but in the same way as you would do kind of a post-exhaust exercise for a training session to make it more time efficient, to get more out of a smaller stimulus, you can do the same with exercise sessions, in that you could do like a leg-based training session that creates a load of lactate, leaves your muscles feeling absolutely ruined, and then go in to day 2 and do a run.
Yep.
And then the benefit of that is that you're going to target muscular endurance to a far greater extent. You might not develop the same degree of cardiovascular capacity because of the fact you're not working out for so long. But it's that whole thing of all these things that we can do to try and make our training week as efficient as possible and get more bang for less.
Oh mate, yeah. There's
less training.
So much you can do, and like, you know, that really plays into the wheelhouse of the whole undulating stuff. You know, I remember at Scotland we used to do like upper body on days when there was, you know, almost like an agonist one. Used to do upper body on days where we'd run a lot.
Yeah.
And the stimulus was lower, and then we'd do lower body as a primer to a speed session.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like, again, like you say, almost supersetting sessions within a day and between days, and looking at like, okay, how can I make the most of that, and how can I make the most of this? We have
a limited amount of training time. How can I get the most out of each of those sessions? How can I create almost... So like, if you think about like the super compensation model and the whole idea that like you create a little dip and then you super compensate. I have to do this in reverse because of the fact we're on camera. Looks right to you. I just realised that. If you create that dip, but then before you've gone back to baseline, you create a further dip by doing a secondary session. As you come back to baseline, you're coming back at a slightly more slanted angle, which means that the super compensation ends up being greater. And then you end up seeing a bigger fitness response from just that staggered stimulus. So it's like, it's an interesting thing to look at, and maybe an interesting thing to talk about on another day. But
definitely, possibly when we talk about French contrast training in detail, possibly even another episode.
Maybe another episode.
Yeah. We've already got the next season planned out. So
we have. So I don't know when we're going to do it, but you know, just stay tuned.
We can just be wild, can't we? Just see what happens.
No. It's all planned now.
It's all planned.
Yeah. My brain couldn't cope. It's too fragile and too sleepy to deal with anything.
Far too autistic for you to change anything, Matt.
Right. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you have got any questions about supersets, feel free to fire them away in the comments. If you do want to chat to either of us, then you can obviously reach out to us on the Performance Proposition page or on our own personal pages, so Multiply Performance and Faulkner Performance. And
like, guys, honestly, if you can, like, subscribe, put reviews on Spotify, put reviews on YouTube, everything helps. Like, if you're enjoying it and you're listening and you feel like you're getting value from it, like, our goal with this is to reach as many people as possible and give them value and give them something that you don't get a lot in the fitness industry, which is like balanced, nuanced, sometimes a little bit drivelly and overindulged information, which is what more people need.
Basically, a view into the inner workings of both of our brains. Like a fun place. The thing for both of us is like, neither of us particularly like social media. Both of us see the damage that social media is doing and don't really want to contribute to the like contrarian, like vitriolic stuff that you see. And this is a great way for us to basically share our knowledge. It's not really about growing our businesses. It's not really about doing anything like that. We're both relatively chilled out doing our coaching, but it's just a nice way for us to talk about things that are interesting and maybe spark conversations with you guys and help you guys get better access to better information.
And with that, season 1
is officially done.
Congratulations.
Boom. Right. Bye, team.
Bye.